Good morning. Thank you for joining. Today we are on chapter 12. Chapter 12 is where it starts to get really exciting because we're starting to now zoom in into more practical guidelines and guidance on how to be able to navigate this internally in our own personal situation. Up until this point, we were more or less laying down the foundation, the groundwork, understanding the structure, the background, how everything works. And now we're ready to start diving in. So, just to recap from last week, where we discussed in more specification the two categories in each extreme. We had in the tzaddik, we had what we called tzaddik gamur, the complete tzaddik, the tzaddik sheino gamur, the incomplete tzaddik, and then we had in the extreme of the rasha as well, we had the rasha v'tov lo, the wicked and it's good, he has good in him, and rasha v'ra lo, the wicked doesn't have any good in him. And those were two basically, extremes opposite each other and somewhat parallel, meaning each one is like 180 degrees from the other, from the other extreme. Today, we're going back smack into the center, the Beinoni. But before we dive into that, I just want to kind of pick up from where we left off last week. In some ways, it feels a little discouraging, because it seems like, the best, the most optimal path is so far from reach, almost like impossible. And what's left for us almost seems to be just, with the title Rasha, which isn't very pleasant, to walk around as a card-carrying member of the Rasha clan. I'm part of the wicked group. That doesn't make most of us feel really good. So where does that leave us? It's kind of like, is this what we're trying to get to? Like to say, by the way, just know your fate, you're part of the wickeds, and, good luck? Or is there something deeper? Is there something more uplifting that we can get from this? And the reason being, because we essentially explained that a tzaddik is somebody who never, ever does anything wrong, is basically perfect. And even in the scope, and if you want to say in the spectrum of the tzaddik, what we have is tzaddik gamur, tzaddik sheino gamur. Even the eino gamur, the incomplete tzaddik, simply means that he doesn't have maybe as much fiery passion for God as the complete tzaddik, but in behavior and practice, he's perfect even in his internals, meaning the incomplete tzaddik has completely overpowered his animal soul, his evil inclination. He doesn't even have desires and temptations for things that he shouldn't do, let alone that he doesn't engage in them. He's not even interested. He sees something that's inappropriate or it doesn't affect him whatsoever. He's not interested. All he wants is God, godliness, holiness, spirituality. How many of us could say that, we fit into that spectrum? It's like, good luck. I got nothing to do with this. And then if the other extreme is just the wicked, meaning we said that even a person who once in a while does things they shouldn't, and then they regret it, they feel bad, and they want to do better, they repent, that's great. That makes you a rasha v'tov lo instead of a rasha v'ra lo. A wicked and then you have good versus a wicked and you're all bad. Oh, great. Thanks for the upgrade. But I'm still in the realm of wicked, so where does that put me? So today we want to be able to bring some comfort to all of us and say, yes, we have a possible path which is reachable, achievable to every single one of us, no matter who we are, no matter what our background is. And it takes us out of the realm of Rasha. It doesn't quite bring us to the realm of Tzaddik, which is why it's reachable. But we also have to understand the facts on the ground. It's very straightforward. We're not going to be sugarcoating reality in any way to make us feel better when it's not true. So we're being very honest. We're being very straightforward. But at the same time, we're laying down a path that is very, very achievable and attainable to every single one of us, that really can lead us into a very high-functioning, righteous, if you want to say, even though it's not tzaddik, but righteous path of living as a upstanding individual in the best way possible. That will affect not only our spiritual life, but it affects our material life, it affects how we interact with other people, how we deal with our family, how we interact with ourselves. Every part of our life is going to be impacted, is going to be elevated by approaching this path. And this is what we call the Beinoni. And after all, this is the book, right? It's the book, Sefer Shal Beinonim. It's the book for the Beinoni, for the in-betweener. Now we have a pretty good understanding what it means when we say in-betweener. And especially after last week's discussion where we further defined the specifics of both the spectrum of the tzaddik and the spectrum of the rasha, we have a much better and deeper appreciation what classifies as the in-betweener. So let's dive into that. And beginning by first summarizing some of the basic characteristics of the Beinoni, of the in-betweener. So one of the most fundamental aspects of the Beinoni is that as far as practice, and when we say practice, we're really talking about all of the three garments, right? We now know what those are. Machshava, dibur, maseh, thought, speech, and action. In those three realms, that means any form of expression, not only expression in action, not only expression in speech, but even in thought. In all of these three realms, the Beinoni is an individual that constantly is in full control of all of that. And when I say full control, what do I mean? I mean that the godly soul dominates. There's a conflict, there's a battle. Chapter 9, we talked about the inner conflict. The brain, the mind, which is where the godly soul resides, and the emotions where the animal soul is. There's a constant conflict between them. Who is going to decide what's going to happen? Who's going to call the shots? Who's going to be sitting in the driver's seat to drive this individual vehicle that's going to direct what I'm going to do, what I'm going to say, what I'm going to think? So the Beinoni is one that constantly succeeds in being able to get the Nefesh HaEloki, to the godly soul, to be the driver, to be in charge, to be running the show, to be the one who is going to be deciding how the thoughts, the speech, and the action. Which practically means that every thought, every speech, and every action is how God wants.
That sounds like a tzaddik.
That sounds like a tzaddik, exactly. Okay, you're right. It does sound like a tzaddik. But here's where it's not like a tzaddik. And this is a very fundamental difference, which is really the crux of what chapter 12 is really trying to bring across to us. The Beinoni is one that internally, that means in the intellect and in the emotions, he's not a tzaddik in the slightest bit. Meaning, he's filled with temptation, with desires, with ideas, with inspirations that are totally not godly soul, necessarily. I mean, he is both, right? He's not just one or the other. But he's got a fully active and alive animal soul that is doing its job exactly as it's supposed to. Remember the parable with the harlot that we had from the Zohar, that was hired by the king to do everything possible to try to get the son, the prince, to commit a sin. That was her job. That's the job of the animal soul. And it does its job very well. It's alive and well. It's kicking and living. It's not quiet. It's not dormant. It's not sleeping. It's doing its thing. However, the Beinoni succeeds in overcoming that all of the time. Sounds a bit stressful, but don't worry, we're gonna get to that. But that detail is a fundamental difference between the tzaddik and the Beinoni.
So the tzaddik is there, that desire is not there.
Exactly. He doesn't have a battle. Yeah. The animal soul has been completely overwhelmed. Either overwhelmed and silenced, or completely transformed if he's a tzaddik gamur. It's not even there.
So even if the Beinoni is acting like a tzaddik, he has to make the conscious choice each time versus just acting.
Exactly. Not just the choice, the effort, which is in a way, I mean, of course, if you don't have the choice, you're not going to get to the effort. But the effort is not easy. And the rest of Tanya, we're basically going to be discussing tools and tactics, how to be able to apply the effort successfully.
I have a question. So Hashem gave us the animal soul. Are there any positive attributes of the animal soul? It seems like there are like a few that we kind of need. Absolutely. We talked about that last week a little bit, right? That the idea of transforming the animal soul is to be able to take the characteristics, the temperaments of the animal soul that are unique for the animal, and then rechannel them for the use of godliness. One of the aspects, the characteristics of the animal soul that stands out most is the passion, the excitement. Fire, like an animal, it's the fire, right? An animal is driven, it's motivated.
So the godly soul, in its own characteristic, it's very calm. It's very, dull. It doesn't have like this fire. So when you're able to take that fire and redirect it for godly purpose, then it's unbelievable. It's amazing. Think of it, by the way, you want to think of it in a practical sense. Some of us here have teenagers. So one of the elements of teenagers is they have this fire, right? They have this fire. In other words, whatever they get on, by the way, as a side point, the scariest thing about a teenager is that you have a adult body with a child mind, right? So it's a very horrible combination.
Not here for it.
So basically you have...
remember being one. It
Right.
sounds like a weird...
Right, exactly. Some of us are still in our teens. But it's interesting, parents and in general, people that would approach the Rebbe with challenges with teens, the Rebbe's approach seemed to almost all the time be one of rather than trying to, stand in the way and block and fight against that energy, you have to find ways to channel it in the right way. The energy is incredible. If only some of us adults would have that kind of energy, it would be unbelievable what we can accomplish. The energy of the youth is incredible. It's tremendous blessing. It's tremendous power. The danger is if it's channeled in the wrong way, then they're going full force, where they're not supposed to go. So the goal is not to shut down that energy, but rather to channel it or to control. Right? Control is a way of shutting it down.
Yeah.
Controlling is you're trying to suppress the energy, saying don't, rather than just pushing it down, which never works and will backfire and cause all sorts of problems. We have to find ways to redirect it and rechannel it. Use the energy, take your energy, but hey, look what you could do. And obviously that in itself has, we need a lot of guidance on how to guide a teenager, because I don't know which teenager ever wants to hear any advice from their parents. That's not usually where they seek inspiration from. But anyways, this is not a class on teen raising, so, but I'm just using...
coaches, but not from their parents.
Exactly. Well, whatever, anything. Reverse psychology can work really well if you're really good at it and smart, but, that's not always easy. I would even think of more extreme examples. You have a person who has a rebellious nature, a person who is willing to go against the status quo, somebody who's a non-conformer, and you could live that way in a way that you're just rebelling against all values and principles, or you can use that approach or that characteristic, if you want to say, to be able to not be shy, to stand up to do what's right, even in the face when you're alone. Somebody will get up and put on tefillin in the middle of an airport because this is what I got to do, and I don't care what anybody thinks. That's a positive way to use your non-conformance in a godly, healthy, positive way. But if you're using it to defy your teachers at school, that's not an appropriate way. That's a negative way to utilize that same approach, that same characteristic. Okay, so that's to answer your question, right? You asked, are there any positives in the animal soul? And yes, this is an example. And of course, there are many other details, and also from individual to individual as well. That could vary. But going back to the concept of the Beinoni, so here we have a fundamental difference between the tzaddik, the individual who naturally is just, kind of on cruise control almost, right? Just doing what's right without much effort. Whereas the Beinoni is in a constant battle. And every single win for the Beinoni is a big deal because it took a lot of effort. Each time it's like you're at the verge of almost like saying what you shouldn't or doing what you shouldn't. We'll get to thinking in a second, but let's first start with speaking and doing. You're at the verge, you're going to say something to somebody and you bite your tongue. So okay, you didn't say it. But hey, what I was about to say, what was boiling inside of me. So why does that make me a good person? Why is that a good positive thing? So that's where we need to understand. When we understand the real definition of the Beinoni, we can appreciate why this life is really achievable to every one of us. Because I know this may sound like, come on, you're making it too easy, but all you have to do is deal with the practical. Meaning, inside, you can still be a mess. Let me give an example of something very practical that probably many of us struggle with it ourselves, or at least we identify with people in our close circle that struggle with this. and that would be anger. So let's say a person who struggles with anger. There's various elements of that which are no good. Obviously, feeling angry inside is already no good. But what's even worse is to act or speak on that anger. If I communicate with somebody as an expression of that anger, that could be hurtful, it could be offensive, it can be inappropriate. If I act on it, I can break something, I can damage, I can cause harm that sometimes can be irreversible. So if we think to ourselves, say I'm struggling with anger, and I think to myself, well, I want to be able to overcome that. And in order for me to overcome that, I believe that I need to be able to get myself to never feel angry again. That could be almost impossible. And if I think that that's where I need to get to, then I'm going to give up because it's not within reach. You know who's not going to feel angry ever again? The tzaddik. The Beinoni is always going to feel angry. And what we're saying here, that's okay. Don't worry about it. What you need to make sure is don't speak on your anger. Don't act on your anger. Don't let it express itself. You feeling the anger? Okay, you're only a Beinoni. Don't get too excited. It's okay. It's normal. It's fine. But what do you mean it's fine? I have anger. Well, that is essentially what we're talking about when we say the Beinoni. The Beinoni is an individual that cannot really truly conquer his or her emotions or intellectual ideas. Because to do that, you have to become a tzaddik. And for most of us, we're not able to become a tzaddik. It's not within our reach. So the first step to be able to grow and to be able to become a better person is to be honest with what's reasonably realistic for us to be able to achieve. And that is what chapter 12 is letting us know. Get real. Don't try to become a tzaddik if you can't. And don't stress yourself out over it. And don't become overwhelmed. Oh, but I'm not a tzaddik. See, you're not a tzaddik. You're not meant to be a tzaddik. That's not what's... But does that mean I have to be a Rasha? No. It means you have to be able to control how you're going to express yourself. Not every emotion that rises up in your heart, you have to think, speak, or do. And if you could have the strength of character to be able to master control over that, which means you're letting your godly soul dominate your thought, speech, and action all of the time, then you're always a Beinoni. Okay? That's, in one way, we have now kind of made this goal very reachable. On the other hand, it's still, if I have to be a Beinoni, it means I always have to succeed in managing my thought, speech, and action, then that still also may seem a little out of reach. Well, the good news is that being a Beinoni or working towards a Beinoni is a lifelong process. And it's like flexing a muscle. The more often you do it, the farther you go with it, and the stronger you become. The more you get used to doing it, the easier in some ways. I say in some ways because the animal soul and the evil inclination are very, very good at being able to find new opportunities to entice us. And to get us excited about doing things we shouldn't, saying things we shouldn't, thinking things we shouldn't. So, but ultimately, the goal is to get more used to it. And the more we get used to it, it's like flexing the muscle, the better we become at it. So that's the first thing we're talking about in the Beinoni. You don't have to transform your insides. For now, we're saying completely disregard it. Don't ignore it. So you feel angry, big deal. It's okay. You feel angry, not a problem. Just don't speak it, don't act it, don't even think it. I'm going to address thoughts here in a moment. So that's the first thing. That's very important to understand, because if we don't realize that, we can basically give up very quickly. So that's number one. Number two, on the other hand, is yes, we got to be on guard, and we always have to be working on being in control of a thought, speech, and action. That's a 24/7 job. It never stops. That can be very stressful. That can feel very tense and like, oh my God, like, can I just have a break? God, give me 15 minutes. Let me just, flush it out. I'm going to think and say and do whatever I want. I'll be back. Give me a little, everybody needs, a little outlet. Give me a little chance. No, there's no outlets. There's no chances. You constantly have to be on guard. That's the Beinoni. So that seems very stressful. So obviously we need more tools to be able to understand how to live with that, how to manage that, and that will come in the future chapters. Yes.
Is there a discussion about the difference between not letting those feelings come out and stuffing it in? Because it seems like people can stuff feelings down and then they come out with big force. So what does the Tanya address that
Absolutely,
distinction?
absolutely. Because as we begin to learn what it really means to master the control of a thought, speech, and action, then if we're dealing with it correctly, we're automatically not just stuffing down emotions, but we're really learning how to be able to manage them. So because I feel angry, I know how to be able to feel that and not let that out on somebody else.
So it's like more of an awareness.
It's an awareness, but it's a tool in knowing how to handle it, how to be able to manage it. And with time, the insights also begin to get a little calmer the more we exercise this. It's never going to go away. Not becoming a tzaddik. So it's never going away, but it does get easier as we apply these principles and these tools more often.
Do you think too, like when it's so easy and then it becomes really hard, how do you get back to making it easy again?
That's a great question. And one idea that can very much guide us in the direction on how to be able to get back to that is by understanding that how we perceived the easy time and how we're perceiving the difficult time is not necessarily an accurate reflection of what it really is. What I mean is as follows. For many of us, when it's easy, we think we're doing really well. And when it's hard, we think we're not doing well. But in Tanya, the Alter Rebbe actually reveals to us that it's not necessarily that way. When it's easy, it could be that it's simply because the animal soul is like relaxing a little bit. So I think, oh look, I'm doing really well. You're not doing well. You're just not being as challenged. And when it's hard, it's not that you're doing worse. In fact, you may actually be doing much better than you were previously. It's just that for whatever reason, your conflict level has risen, has gone up. So it's harder to do what you were doing before. In fact, it could even be that the reason it's getting harder is because you're doing so well. Think of it in a conflict. If you have two nations fighting each other, when the enemy forces begin to attack stronger, it's not necessarily because you're getting weaker, but oftentimes it's because you're about to win. And therefore, they're going to now take out every possible resource they have that they may have been saving in the back end, for a really important moment. So the fact that you have it really difficult now may be proof that you're doing so well, and that is why the animal soul is now like going crazy. Now, that doesn't necessarily make the conflict better, but when we are empowered to know that we're doing well, that gives us more confidence, that gives us more motivation. So much of what we're going to be talking about, which is what leads into the next aspect of the Benoni that I want to bring across, that's in chapter 12, is about perspective. It's all about how we apply our mindset. Because let's remember that the godly soul, the way it's structured, as we already studied, is that it begins with the mind. Hamoach shalit al halev. The mind controls and rules and dominates over the heart. So when we have the right mindset and we have the right perspective on how to look at the situation, we could guide the emotions to be paralleled to that influence. And that is how the godly soul succeeds in being able to overcome the conflict. Sometimes you see a temptation, or you're excited about something that you shouldn't be excited about. You're drawn to it. It's because your emotion is starting to get the better of you. And it's trying to tell your mind to want it, to strategize how to be able to achieve it, and so on. But if you then take a different perspective, intellectual approach, and you redirect your mind to say, no, that's not good, that's not right, that's not the right way, and you begin to re-influence your inside from that path, now you have dominated that emotion, which addresses a little bit what you were saying before. You're not shoving down that emotion, you've redirected, you've recreated the new emotion that is appropriate. It's temporary, because the animal soul, the next second, if you let go, it's going to come right back. So you haven't really inside changed anything, but through that, you've now given yourself the strength and the capability to say, I'm not doing that. Now you better move on, because if you don't continue applying the exercise of the godly soul, you'll be right back at wanting that, a moment later. But you can overcome that. How many of us can think, I'm sure we can all think of examples. Say even talking about a food temptation. Something that you shouldn't eat. It's not good for you. And I'm not even talking about spiritually, I'm talking about even physically. It's the same principle, it's the same concept. And you're like, I really want that. And then you eat it. It's over. Well, you live then with the regret or the consequences of whatever it was that you ate, right? Now, say you manage to have the inner strength and say, I'm not going to do it, I'm not going to do it. And then you walk away. It's gone. It's over, right? It's not like for the next week you're thinking about that piece of cake. It's over. You moved on. Now, if you walk back past the bakery again, it may happen again. But for now, it's over. What happened? Essentially, the fact that you were able to have the inner strength not to eat that came from your godly soul. You applied a mindset, a perspective that redirected your emotion to inspire a new emotion that says, I don't want that because it's not good. And then through that, you're able to master the control over the action, not to eat that. And then you walked away. You haven't changed. It's not like, I never crave these cakes anymore. No, that's not happening. But right now, you succeeded. Tomorrow, you may have to have the same battle. Now, obviously, you want to try to be careful. You don't put yourself in positions where you're going to have temptations. But we're all going to have temptations all the time, here and there. We can't, the goal isn't to live on a cave and never go out. That's not the point. The point is to learn how to be able to manage temptations. Obviously, we don't just outright put ourselves in a situation like somebody has a gambling addiction. Don't walk into the casino. It's not a mitzvah to walk in, sit down, and say, I'm not going to gamble. It's okay. You don't have to go there, right? It's like you don't have to put yourself in the face of the challenge to say, I'm going to win. There's no need to do that. But no matter what we do, we're always going to be facing struggles and temptations that we have to deal with. And the more we learn how to redirect the perspective, which is ultimately what the godly soul does, then we're able to succeed. Yes?
It seems like this is, like psychology comes from a lot of these, it's a lot of the same principles that just took the God part out, which is, I know, a huge part of it, but it just reminds me of things that I've learned along those lines, either from therapy or just, classes and whatnot.
Absolutely. There are a lot of parallels, although there are some specifics sometimes that are different. And personally, I think that the best approach is this one.
Of course.
So, a few things that we have to still close over here. Number one, I want to address the thoughts, because that's often an area that's very confusing, and it's important to gain good clarity on what that means. When we talk about mastering control of our actions, we understand very well what that means. Don't do it. We talk about mastering control over speech. Don't say it. Got it. Now, what does it mean, mastering control over our thoughts? Our mind never stops. The thought, as the terminology that's used in Chassidus, hamachshava meshotetet tamid. The thought is always active. It's always moving. You can't stop thinking. So what does it mean to control one's thoughts? So it's important to understand that, so we can then be reasonable. Again, the whole point here is to get to a place where we can reasonably understand what the expected goals are. So when we talk about mastering control of our thoughts, we have to differentiate between what is basically called an impulsive thought versus an active thought. One way of explaining that is somewhat relatable to pretty much all of us, although it's existing less and less, is the concept of a pop-up. When you're browsing your computer and there's a pop-up. Today you still have that, right? The website, boom. Do you want to sign up to see this every day or 10% off? Like, no, I'm not interested, right? So what do you do with a pop-up? Here's the thing. You can't control the pop-ups. Of course, you can put up filters and go to antivirus systems, but there's still some that are going to make it through, right? Okay. Ultimately, the pop-up that comes up, it's beyond your control. That's not something the Beinoni should be concerned with trying to address. Can't control the pop-up. That's what we call an impulsive thought. It came up, popped up in my mind. Whoops, popped up. That's not a violation of being in control of your thought. What is the definition of being in control of your thought is whether or not you're going to click on that pop-up. Now it popped up. Are you going to click X or are you going to click more? That's the question. So if you click more, now you're on your own. Now you have allowed yourself what we call an active thought. And that difference is very critical because the Beinoni does not have the ability to control his or her impulsive thoughts. Those thoughts are really a revelation, if you want to say. It's kind of like an expression of the mind, which the animal soul has a mind as well. It has the intellectual components, as we described when we talked about the structure. So the animal soul has a mind, and therefore it's going to express thoughts. And those thoughts are naturally going to be from the animal soul, which are not necessarily appropriate. They're going to be very self-centered and self-driven. They could be, I have an idea, I want to take that from somebody, or I want to be jealous, or whatever, animal soul ideas. They're going to pop up. That's fine. Don't get stressed out. You're not a tzaddik. So these ideas pop up. So I see my friend's new car, and boom, I have like an envious thought. That's okay. That's you're just a Benoni. So don't get too excited about yourself. The question is, what do you do with that? When that thought comes, do you right away push it away, which means you clicked X? Or do you say, that car, my God. So if you didn't say anything, you didn't do anything, but you're starting to allow your mind to kind of dwell on it, then that is a violation. That would mean that you have now not succeeded in controlling your thought. The Benoni who controls his thoughts is one that as soon as that envious idea pops in their mind, they immediately are able to distract. Say, no, that's the animal soul, the godly soul, something else. Now, how do you do that? How do you redirect your thoughts? There's only one way to do that. Think something else. You can't think two things at once. So there's only one way to push away a thought that you don't want, is by introducing a thought that you do want. So a Benoni has to have in his repertoire always available good thoughts, so that whenever something inappropriate pops up, the way you click X is by diving in, pulling into that suitcase or the backpack that you have with all those good thoughts, and boom, bring one in. And what's going to happen? It'll go away. It's like the cake. It's not going away that is never going to come back. If you let it, it'll come back again. But the more you keep pushing it away, it's going to just disappear because you get distracted, something else comes. And that's okay. So as long as we are honest and realistic about what the goal is, what the expectation, it's doable. It's not easy. And it could be stressful at times. Imagine every moment, oh my God, this thought keeps popping in my mind and I gotta keep pulling in this other. It's difficult. And sometimes it can be very stressful because it could be a thought that's continuously nagging at us, that really wants to try to get us down. And we have to constantly keep pushing it away. So I'm giving an example of, a car, a neighbor, that's probably easier to get over, I hope, for most of us. But sometimes you have somebody that's bothering you, that's hurting you, or insulting you, and you keep having negative thoughts about that person that are not appropriate. Revenge, or things that, you shouldn't do. Anger. So you have to keep pushing those thoughts away. And that could be a very difficult task in the sense of the exercise and the effort that needs to be applied. And in order to be able to make it easier, it will be helpful to not only have access to good thoughts in general, but to good perspectives, to be able to change the view on how you see, let's say, somebody who is messing with you, somebody who's upsetting you. And when you're able to perceive that interaction in a different way, and not only are you distracting your mind from that negative thought, but you're actually reframing what's happening, that you're not taking offense. You're not allowing yourself to be personally impacted by that person's inappropriate behavior, so that you don't have to even deal so much with those feelings of anger and revenge and so on. Question?
So going to the car example, and understanding that there are some hairs to be split here, but what if you twisted it from a jealousy thought to spurring you to step up your game, whatever it is, so that you can have something similar, but also that it takes better care of your family, and it's a car that's more reliable. Like, you can kind of spin it in a way that encourages you to do more to get to that place, rather than, oh, they have it, I don't, I want it like they have, What is it?
Well, I think what you're asking is really getting more into the core of what is appropriate jealousy and what isn't. If I see my neighbor has a car and I think, oh wow, that would be really convenient for my family, I want to try to get that. That's not jealous. That's okay. Oh, somebody gives an idea. You see somebody, I never thought of this. Wow, that's brilliant. Like, I should do that. That's not jealousy. Jealousy is when you feel, how come they have it and I don't have it?
Oh, okay.
And it oftentimes, it expresses itself in areas of things you don't really need. It's just like, I wish I could drive a car like that. Why do you need a car like that? They can afford it, whatever. Maybe they don't need it either, but they chose to buy it. Well, just because they bought it, now I have to be able to show that I can also drive a car like that. And if you're going to use your mind to justify reasons why you should need that, that would be actually feeding into the jealousy.
Okay.
Because that's what the jealousy ultimately wants to do.
Right.
The jealousy is an emotion that needs to now find intellectual justification to be able to get yourself to go and act on the jealousy, which is to buy. That would be the better option in extreme cases. Obviously, none of us experience that, but in extreme cases would be to steal or to take that other person's possession because you don't have it and they have it.
I see.
Okay. So I want to read from the text for a second here in the end of chapter 12, since we were talking about reframing the situation to be able to, instead of just introducing a positive thought to dismiss the negative thought, but to reframe the perspective, and then naturally you're not as affected by the negative situation, that you're not having the negative thought in the first place. So the Alter Rebbe gives an example here towards the end of chapter 12. He says as follows. Also, in human relationships, the Beinoni exhibits complete self-control. As soon as a thought of ill will or hatred, God forbid, rises from his heart to his mind, or any thoughts of envy, anger, or resentment, etc., he categorically refuses to embrace those thoughts in his mind or with his will. So that's how you push it away. That's the first idea, right? You categorically refuse. I'm not going to allow this thought to come. How do you do that? By bringing something else. But then he goes on and he says, on the contrary, it is his mind that controls and dominates the inclination of his heart to do the exact opposite, to act in a kind way towards the individual, showing him extra affection. Even if another person acts abominably, the self-mastery of the Beinoni demands a positive, loving response, devoid of any anger or resentment. But is there any limit to the degradation the Beinoni is required to suffer before seeking some retribution? He should tolerate the antagonist to extreme limits without becoming angry, God forbid, and also to refrain from repaying the antagonist his just deserts, even for the sake of justice and not out of anger, for this would violate the prohibition not to take revenge, nor bear grudge, God forbid. Rather, on the contrary, repay the guilty with positive acts. As stated in the Zohar, we should learn from Joseph and the way he treated his brothers. So here is an amazing example, which you see basically how a very negative situation was reframed. Joseph had every reason to be able to take full revenge against his brothers. His brothers treated him not horrible is an understatement for what they did to him. They were ready to kill their own brother. They sold him as a slave. They mistreated him in the worst of situations. And yet, as we know the story, when the brothers came to Egypt, Joseph took care of them, he gave them food and so on, and he really welcomed them. And the brothers themselves were surprised by that behavior. And what did Joseph say? He said to them, you had bad intentions, what you did. That's between you and God. You got to work it out. You sinned. That's not my problem. But for me, what happened to me was not because of you. God put me in this situation for a good reason. And I recognize this as a mission, and therefore I'm not angry at you. What you did wrong. You can work it out with God. That's your problem. For me, you didn't do anything to me. So he reframed the situation in a way that not only he didn't have to control himself not to be angry with his brothers, he's going to help them because that's why he came there. He was put in this place for this mission to be able to be a source of sustenance for the people and certainly his family in a difficult time of famine. So that is really the ultimate goal of what the Beinoni strives to accomplish, is to reframe the perspective that somebody wrongs you. You're not getting angry, not because you push the anger down, but you reframe the whole situation, and now you see their behavior in a different light. You're not angry. Think, for example, somebody cuts you off on the highway. You get upset. And say you're really upset, you're going to now follow them and chase them down. They go off the exit, and you're racing behind them, and you see that they then go and quickly zoom into the hospital parking lot, and somebody comes rushing out to the emergency room. What happened at that moment? Are you still angry at them? Why? They still cut you off on the highway. Nothing changed. What changed is your perspective. Until a second ago, you thought of them as a sick person, doesn't care, is just totally careless, and doesn't pay attention to anybody else. Suddenly you realize, oh my God, this poor person was in distress. There's somebody who needs urgent help, and oh my God, of course, please cut me off. Like, go right ahead, right? So what happened is your perspective changed. And we could do that in any situation. It's like giving somebody the benefit of the doubt. Now, it could be that they don't deserve that. And that's fine, meaning fine in the sense that you don't have to give them the benefit of the doubt to them. You have to give it for yourself. Say somebody wronged you to the point that it requires that you have to even call the police on them, or you have to prosecute them, or whatever it may be. You do what you have to do. That's between them and the law. But for me, I give them benefit of the doubt. Meaning I'm not angry, I'm not upset. And what happened to me is what I needed to experience. It's not because of them. Their issue is between them and God, between them and the law. They need to work it out. But I'm not holding resentment, anger, or wanting to take revenge on them. So it's a shift of perspective. So that's a even stronger and better way how a Beinoni can deal with the inappropriate emotions, is not just to push them aside by introducing something else. That's the first step. But an even better step is to learn how to be able to reframe situations in a way that you're in charge. Okay? All right. Any other questions? All right. So I'll just close by saying the following. This essentially is laying the groundwork of what the Beinoni looks like. Obviously, there's still many, many, many unanswered questions. It's not enough to be able to take this and then say, okay, I got what I need and I'm going to move on. There's still a lot of tools and a lot of ideas that we're looking for. And in the coming chapters, we're going to be addressing one by one in a very organized manner. It's going to keep going to practical tools, understanding further in detail realistic goals, what is really the expectation, what does a Beinoni do, and so on and so forth. So we'll close with that. Thank you very much for joining.